I'm going to explain the CIC briefly and introduce the members in a minute. First, I just want to welcome the representatives of the Cincinnati Classical Academy and all of you citizens of Evendale. The purpose of this meeting is to hear from CCA, Classical Academy of Cincinnati, Cincinnati Classical Academy, forgive me. I'll refer to it as CCA. Has come to the village with a proposal. So the purpose of this meeting is to hear from CCA, their presentation about what they'd like to do, and give you an opportunity to ask them questions. This is an information-only meeting. We have a number of village officials here, but this is not a village decision or council meeting. Just to be clear about that, all we'll be doing this evening is getting information and answering questions. You also have a questionnaire attached to the agenda for the meeting. This will also be posted on our Facebook site and our website, and people can respond to it. And is it May 2nd, David, is the deadline to get the receipt of that information back. CCA is proposing to build a charter school, and they're looking for property to do that. And one of the places they've looked is the village of Evendale. So they approached Evendale as one choice. They have other potential sites within Evendale and others outside of Evendale. This meeting's discussion is restricted to the particular proposal they've made to the village, because that is the only piece of property that the village owns and controls. The site they've proposed is the vacant property to the north of the admin building and the tennis courts, the so-called rinks property, which is how it's known to long-timers, and we'll refer to it as the rinks property. When they came to the village, they came to the CIC, and that's why we agreed to hold this meeting, sponsored by the CIC on behalf of the village. What is the CIC? Community Improvement Corporations are entities that can be chartered by communities under Ohio law for the purpose of transacting property sales and purchases, so that the elected officials have, if you will, an arm's length relationship to involvement in any of those transactions directly. Now, the actions of the CIC, certainly within Evendale, are subject to approval by council on behalf of all of you. They are your elected representatives. CIC members, 3 are elected officials, the mayor and 2 council people in this case, and 4 of us are citizens of Evendale, either business or residential citizens, or both. In 2011, the village of Evendale completed a master plan for economic development. The village, as you probably know, had land banked a lot of property after certain older and deteriorating properties were condemned and taken down. But the village doesn't want to remain in the business of holding property and selling it. But that's where a CIC comes in. It can be very handy. So the CIC took the results of the master plan, developed a priority list for all of the land bank properties the village holds, and then we began to work from those. And so some examples of what's happened is, the way this works is the village and council on behalf of the village transfers property to the CIC to allow it to act, and then approves any transactions the CIC takes. So, for example, the Arrow Hub development on the other side of I-75, if you've had a chance to go over there, there's been a lot of activity over there, and we are actively marketing sites over there for advanced manufacturing. You've also noticed some changeover and increased development along Reading Road. These are properties that were transferred to the CIC for marketing, and we have done so. I need to be clear that the Rinks property was not included in that prioritization. It has not been transferred to the CIC. It is held by the village itself. Again, it was convenient for the CIC to hold this meeting because we normally serve as an economic development committee for the village. But this is not a, as I said earlier, this is not a done property transfer or sale at this point. It's CCA coming to us with an idea. That idea is a use we had not considered. It's a novel use for property in the village. When the master plan was done, the Rinks property remained set aside, not under CIC control, and it is zoned public facilities. So any other use will require a rezoning. Don't be stumbling over that. That would pretty much be true for a charter school anywhere it went in the village, and a lot of other places too, outside of Evendale. Since it was a novel use and it had not been pre-zoned and had not been transferred to CIC for development, the elected officials in the village, the mayor and the council people in the village, wanted public input on this use. We wanted you to be able to hear from the Cincinnati Classical Academy. They wanted you to consider that use for that site, since that's their proposed site and that is property the village owns. And then feed back to your elected officials what your reaction is, what your ideas are, what you favor or don't favor, this and that. So what we're going to do is allow the Cincinnati Classical Academy folks to present to you their ideas for what they'd like to do for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have about 30 minutes of question and answer for them afterward. Before we proceed to that, I'd just like to make a few introductions. You, of course, know Mayor Finan, Vice Mayor Jeff Albrink. Councilman Tom Sextro is also a member of the CIC, as is Dave Harwood, Tom Keekley, and Al Perlman. The CIC has a subcommittee. The CIC only meets monthly, and there's enough activity going on that we need to be meeting more often than monthly to get business done. So we have a subcommittee of the CIC that meets. Again, doesn't make decisions except in full CIC meetings, but we sort of facilitate the day-to-day progress of things that go along. So Chris Patterson, who's the chair of the Planning Commission, is also a member of that CIC subcommittee. And our consultant, Sean Ballness, who I know is here, but I've lost, there you are. Sean is with Red Tiger Investments, and Sean has been invaluable to the CIC and subcommittee for a number of years now, helping us with our development. Sean has long experience with redeveloping properties for Kroger, among others, in various parts of the country. In the interest of full disclosure, just so you know, Sean also happens to be the consultant to the Cincinnati Classical Academy. So Sean introduced us to them, and then we asked Sean to stay at an arm's length as far as our interactions, so that all of that's above board, just to be clear. We also have most of our council people here tonight. I might ask that you all stand up. Chris Schaefer, Bill Putoff, Beth McDaniel, Carolyn Smiley Robertson, then of course Jeff Albrink and Tom Sextro, and Mr. Mayor, and I think that's everybody, right? So, without further ado, thank you for indulging that explanation, and that's sort of the boundaries in which we're going to have this information presentation and discussion. I'd like to introduce an Evendale resident who is spearheading this effort and serving as the chairman of the board for the Cincinnati Classical Academy, Dr. Jed Hardings. And Jeff, I'll ask you to introduce the other CCA and affiliated representatives, if you will. So welcome, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks, Mayor Finan. Thank you, Dr. McKinnon, and the Evendale Community Improvement Corporation for entertaining our ideas here and the invitation to present in this public forum. And thanks to the Village Council members who are attending as well, and to all the Evendale and fellow Greater Cincinnati residents for coming to talk about this important project and hear about it. We're thrilled to be here and to share our plans for the Cincinnati Classical Academy, which will be a K-12 tuition-free public school, charter school, and aims to be part of a national network of schools that are affiliated with Hillsdale College. So our goal, as Dr. McKinnon has stated, is in the next half hour to provide an overview of the Cincinnati Classical Academy, you know, who we are, how this is established, what kind of school we're trying to begin, and to also present our interest in locating the school on the Rinks property just to our north. So to begin with, just a high-level overview. CCA was established by a board of Cincinnati residents at our initiative, and we are incorporated as a nonprofit corporation. I know there are some for-profit charter schools. We are not one of them. We are nonprofit, and the board is entirely volunteer. Last summer, we applied for acceptance into the Barney Charter School initiative of Hillsdale College, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a moment, but we were accepted into that program through a competitive application process, and then subsequently applied for our charter through the sponsorship of St. Aloysius, which is located in Bond Hill, another nonprofit organization. They're authorized by the state of Ohio to authorize and sponsor new charter schools. So we are on track to open, with the intention of opening in the year 2022, a year and a half from now. And our intention is to begin with kindergarten through 6th grade, and then add a grade each year until we have a full K through 12. And expect that the initial enrollment will be somewhere around 600 students, and increasing, growing to 1,200 maximum through 2028 when we have that full K through 12. So there are misconceptions out there by some about what a charter school is, so I thought it's worthwhile to review a few key points as it pertains to our school. Charter schools are known as community schools here in Ohio, and they were established in 1997 in Ohio law in order to expand school choice, public school choice. Charter schools are operated by a board of directors, and that board of directors is independent of the public school districts. And so therefore they have flexibility to articulate their own distinct mission, vision, and curriculum. But in every sense, they are public schools. They are funded directly from the state of Ohio on a per pupil basis, and they are tuition free to families who send their kids there. Importantly, any Ohio resident may enroll tuition free, and by law, it's not allowed to apply any aptitude criteria for admission. So there's no entrance exams. Any student can enroll. There's only some exceptions of priority given in the case that admissions applications would exceed our total school capacity. And in that case, there is some priority given, first of all, to students who were previously enrolled in the school. Secondly, to residents of the school district where the school is located. So if we were located in Evendale, that would mean any resident of the Princeton School District would have priority to enroll over, say, Sycamore or Cincinnati Public Schools. And then thirdly, the siblings of enrolled students, because we want to keep families together. Another important point is that students at a charter school may participate in extracurricular activities either at CCA if they're offered, or at schools of the public school district where they live. So for instance, if there's a CCA student who wants to participate in orchestra, they can be in CCA's orchestra, or if they live in the Princeton School District, they can be a part of Princeton's orchestra. Or if the student wants to be on the swim team, but CCA doesn't have a swim team, and they live in Sycamore School District, then they can be on Sycamore's swim team. So another entity that many of you here won't be familiar with is the Barney Charter School Initiative of Hillsdale College. So what is that? And the BCSI was established to promote the founding of classical charter schools and excellence in their teaching and operations, to the end that public school students may be educated in the liberal arts and sciences and receive instruction in principles of moral character and civic virtue. You'll see some of that same phrasing again in a minute. The BCSI opened their first school in 2012, and they currently are affiliated with 24 charter schools located throughout the country. What Hillsdale does is provide support to affiliated schools, and they do so at no cost to them. This is a national service that they provide. So what service does that include? That includes licensed use of a K through 12 curriculum that Hillsdale College professors have developed and that has been refined through nearly 10 years of use at the affiliate schools. They assist in hiring and interviewing the principal for the school. They assist in training of the school board. In fact, our school board's going up to Hillsdale next week for 3 days of training. They train our teachers, professional development, and the staff. And they also provide oversight and assistance, not only in school startup, but also continuously as an ongoing relationship in our operations. And this is a list and a national map of the existing Hillsdale charter schools. You can see stretching out from the Rocky Mountains down to across the Midwest and down into Florida. The key point here is the enrollment cumulatively throughout all these schools. Currently, there are over 14,000 students being educated with this curriculum. But more important is this number down below it, more than 8,000 students currently on wait lists to attend Hillsdale-affiliated charter schools, which I think is great evidence of the high demand for these schools and the great success of these schools in offering an attractive educational curriculum. And anyone who wants to zoom in a little bit closer and see, Hillsdale just added the Cincinnati Classical Academy to their map as one of the future schools. So our founding board is shown here. They're all with us here tonight. Again, this is an all-volunteer board. It consists of 2 biomedical professionals, myself and Dr. Smith. Joe Fassant is an MBA, who's our fiscal officer. Brian Kennedy is a former lawyer who is now a stay-at-home father, a recovering lawyer, as he likes to say. And then we have 2 educators on the board. Cheryl Boyd, who had a career as an early childhood educator, and Paul Mittermeier, who's a Hillsdale graduate himself twice, and is now a high school teacher at a classical school teaching logic and rhetoric. We also have a number of partners, a number of whom I've already mentioned, as well as various associates in real estate, Sean Balnes, and in construction and legal and financial. So the mission of the school will be, again, familiar language, to train the minds and nourish the hearts of young men and women through a rigorous, content-rich, classical curriculum in the liberal arts and science with instruction in moral character and civic virtue. And we've chosen as our motto the Latin phrase, scientia est libertas, which translates to knowledge is freedom. And this has meaning to us on two levels. First of all, that a proper education is necessary for personal self-governance in a free society in which we all must look after ourselves and determine our own paths in life. And secondly, it has meaning on a national level that an educated citizenry is necessary for political self-governance in a democratic republic. So what does it mean to be a classical school? Do not think that this is a classical music academy. It is not a music academy. Classical, in this context, refers to classical antiquity, the ancient, the Greeks and the Romans, as well as the classical period in Western civilization that was, highlighted by the Enlightenment and the period of founding of our nation. In the context of a classical education, it can be understood simply as meaning a traditional education. And so the purpose, pedagogy, and subject matters of a classical school are derived from the traditions of Western civilization, and they have all proven their value over centuries. So we can look at each of these in turn briefly. What is the purpose of education in a classical school? It includes utilitarian ends like graduating, getting a diploma, going to college, if that's right for the individual, and getting a job. But it also goes beyond that in providing skills and learning that are needed simply for life, to live a meaningful life. The purpose of education is to provide nourishment of the soul, or in the words of Plato, teaching children to desire the right things. And what are those things? Those things are the good, the true, and the beautiful, as revealed through our Western civilization inheritance. So really the purpose is to prepare not just for employment, but also to be good moms, to be good dads, and to be good citizens of this country and of our communities. As far as the pedagogy, it's traditional as well. The primary method is seminar lecture in the lower grades, and then as students reach the higher grades, it's Socratic dialogue. There's a great deal of memorization and recitation. And there's also a heavy reliance, when possible, on primary source documents. So students would read and perhaps memorize the Gettysburg Address, the preamble to the Constitution. If they're learning about geometry, they're going to read Euclid, etc. The subject matters as well are traditional. The classical model is characterized in Hillsdale in particular by a very strong core curriculum, which I'll get into just a little bit. But I also wanted to highlight here a few of the key subject matters in which it does differ from what you find in a lot of schools. That includes the teaching of explicit phonics and grammar with the use of sentence diagramming, the teaching of cursive handwriting, the study of Latin, a greater emphasis on music, the teaching of logic, moral philosophy, and government. And so from that broad overview, we can further define a few key characteristics of the school. It includes the centrality of the Western tradition in the study of history, literature, philosophy, and fine arts, a rich and recurring examination of the American literary, moral, philosophic, political, and historical traditions. The teaching of Latin, as I mentioned, that begins in the 6th grade and is a core requirement from 6th grade to 9th grade. And Latin and Greek roots are also introduced beginning in 4th and 5th grade. It includes the teaching of objective standards of correctness, logic, beauty, weightiness, and truth. In other words, that means that we can identify some things as being better than other things. There are ways that we can do that, and we want to teach our students to make those discernments. The heavy use of storytelling in history and literature to ignite imaginations, to inspire awe and wonder, which are prized in the classical tradition. A school culture demanding of moral virtue, decorum, respect, discipline, and studiousness among the students and modeled by the faculty. A curriculum that's content-rich. What does that mean? That means knowledge-rich. That means we're going to expect students to learn a great deal of facts and dates and names, because that sort of lower level cognitive skill is necessary as a precedent to higher ordered thinking and the application of logic. You can't apply logic if your mind is empty of content. And then finally, extracurricular offerings, as you would find in other schools, in the fine arts, in academics, and in athletics, according to what the interests of our families are and in accordance with the school mission. And I never like to just dwell on generalities. It's always good to look under the hood and have a glimpse into the curriculum to see what's there at the detail level. So I'm just going to offer a few slides on that. And my first offering here is an overview of the high school curriculum and highlighting the strength and depth of the core requirements. And here I want to draw attention particularly to the literature and history courses that are required of all students in 9th through 12th grade. In literature, they begin 9th grade with ancient literature, a full year of it, 10th grade, a full year of British and medieval literature, then American, and then modern literature in 11th and 12th grades. And in history, it's similar. Ancient world history, European history, American history, modern world history. These are not electives, these are core requirements, and you also notice how the literature and the history are aligned in the same year according to time period and geography, so that what's learned in literature is reinforced through history, etc. You'll also notice the recurrence of the curriculum. They're taking American history here in 11th grade. They've also studied it in 7th and 8th grade, and in fact, they're studying it beginning in kindergarten. So the subject matters recur. I'd also want to highlight these other courses that you don't find in a lot of schools. First semester of freshman year, full semester of formal logic, followed by a semester of rhetoric. In the next year, it's economics and moral philosophy, followed by a full year of moral and political philosophy in 11th grade as an antecedent to the study of American government. We can drill down even a little bit deeper if you can indulge me. This stuff's hard for me to resist. It's so wonderful, in my opinion. But we can just take an example and look at the 3rd grade history and geography, just the first semester. You can see some of the terms, the proper and the common nouns that students are expected to learn. Names of rivers, geographic features. The study of history in the 3rd grade is world history, focusing on Rome and the Vikings. And I've just listed the topics that they're meant to cover studying Rome alone, as well as a few of the key dates, the minimal dates they're expected to memorize. We move on to the music curriculum. 6th grade as a second example. And music is particularly interesting to highlight because it's distinguished in the CCA, the Hillsdale curriculum, compared to other schools by students taking music classes 3 times a week as opposed to 1 time a week, kindergarten through 8th grade. They learn music history, music theory, all the key elements of music. They spend about 1/3 of their time studying the theory, about 1/3 of the time listening to music, and 1/3 of the time producing it. So that by the time they finish the 8th grade, if they've gone through this full course, they will all be able to read music and produce music with their God-given instruments, the human voice. And then as a third example, I offer the moral philosophy class in the 11th grade, where they spend the first semester studying Aristotle's moral philosophy, physics, ethics, and politics. And then in the second semester, the more modern thinkers, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, and then the German philosophers, so they have a full, comprehensive view of what the greatest thinkers have said and written about what is human nature and how humans should organize in society. So I hope that that gives some flavor for the type of school that we're looking to bring to Cincinnati, and leads into the question of where exactly will we be bringing this school. As Dr. McKinnon mentioned, we've been looking at many properties throughout the city, from Kennedy Heights all the way up here to Evendale, and several locations here in Evendale, but our preferred site is the Rinks property just to the north of us. And we've done demographic research on each of the sites we've been interested in, and there are several reasons why we prefer this property. You can see that there's a robust student population within a 5-mile radius of where we're located. That 5-mile radius is indicated here by this yellow ring. Each dot on this map represents 10 students. So there's more than 23,000 students in a 5-mile radius of where we're sitting now. That's robust. Probably the greatest attraction of this site, other than its particular setting, is the access to transportation corridors. Being located on a major roadway, Reading Road, provides good access, but we're also just a mile or so away from I-75, and only a couple miles from 275 to the north, 71 to the east, and Ronald Reagan Cross County Highway to the south. And so what this gives us is easy access from a wide area of the city. This jagged green line here indicates the 10-minute driving zone from our current location. So within 10 minutes, you can be at this location from Westchester, from Mason, practically from Indian Hill, and then all the way down into Elmwood Place, St. Bernard, and then to the west, nearly Winton Woods. And this again shows the 5-mile radius. 5-mile radius is just something that most schools consider when they're looking at their student population. And you can see how this 5-mile radius maps onto the other school districts. There are 10 different school districts in this 5-mile radius, including, in addition to Butler County. And this is a map of the families who have filled out a survey with an intent to enroll their students at CCA. And it shows this was something that we just initiated a couple weeks ago, so it's obviously still populating. We're a year and a half out, but this is the location of real families with real students that they want to send to CCA. And you can see they're widely spread throughout the city, and supports our feeling that a large majority of our students will be drawn actually from outside, from beyond the 5-mile enrollment zone, and further bolsters our interest and confirms our thinking that being centrally located is a great idea. As we can see here, Evendale's the center of mass. So if we are to build new construction for our building, we are using the Summit Construction Group, with whom were first introduced last year. We've been working with them over a period of four or 5 months to consider plans for our site. They've done a lot of the demographic research for us. We went to them because they're the most prolific builder for Hillsdale BCSI schools. They've built six of these schools to date. But they've also built a lot of other schools as well, with over 40 now in their portfolio, including 32 new greenfield construction projects. And Summit has offered a rendering of what a school layout could look like on the Rinks property. And I share this here with the understanding that this should not be construed as any specific proposal. This was a sort of a thought experiment or a proof of principle exercise that a school could be built on this property and meet the needs and the capacity of our school with 1,200 students, kindergarten through 12, with a gymnasium, a soccer field, sufficient parking, and sufficient traffic flow around for safe drop-off and pickup of students. So this is just one concept, and again, I can share some additional pictures of what renderings would look like of a school concept on this property, with the understanding that these are not specific proposals in any way. So this is this is the front view from the road. Another view. And then this would be a view from the north, looking south on Reading Road. This is from the east, up on that soccer field and the archery range of the municipal complex. This is a high up helicopter level view from the west, where you can see the municipal complex to the right. An overhead view. And then finally, the full view where you can see the intersection of Glendale-Milford Road running up the hill here, and Reading Road here with the full municipal complex. I think it integrates quite nicely. It looks quite beautiful. We're attracted to the concept of having a public school located next to such a great public facility as the municipal complex. So I would now like to introduce three individuals. I know at least two of them are here who have joined us today for this meeting. The first is Eric Kuykendall. Eric, if you can stand up. Eric came down today from Hillsdale College. He is the Associate Director of the Barney Charter School Initiative. We've been in touch at least once every 2 weeks for a long time now. And then Todd Lucas came up today from Florida to represent the Summit Construction Group. He is the Senior Vice President there. We've been having weekly calls as well. So thank you, Todd and Eric, for joining us. And is Jenny Kilgore here? Okay, she's the District 4 representative for the Ohio Board of Education who had wanted to join us tonight, but she wasn't sure she'd be able to make it. So that's all I have to present, and I'd like to invite for the question and answer session. Let me also just have real quick, our other board members stand up. This is Brian Kennedy, Cheryl Boyd, Dave Smith, and Joe Fassant. And our sixth board member he's a Cincinnati native, went to St. X High School, but he's the Hillsdale graduate who's now teaching at a classical academy down in Tampa, Florida. He will move back here once the school opens to be one of our first teachers, if not one of our school leaders and administrators. So I'd like to ask Todd and Eric to come up and join me, and they can assist in answering some questions if it's outside of my purview.
Let me just take a moment, their thoughts. I know as the question and answer lengthens, a few people may end up having to leave. Before that happens, I just want to acknowledge the fine presentation you've made. Thanks to all of you for coming. I want to thank all of the departments of the village, Dave Elmer, who is the Director of Administrative Services, and his staff, James Jeffers, the Village Engineer and Service Department Director, our police force, fire force, and rec center employees have all made extra time to hold this meeting, and I really appreciate the village making arrangements for that to happen. So with that, we'll open it up to you for questions and answers. Thank you.
And there's a microphone right here for anyone.
Yes, thank you, sorry. Please come to this microphone, or you're welcome to go to the podium as well. Thank you.
I'd like to know where the funding is coming from.
The funding comes from the state of Ohio. They reimburse the school on a per pupil basis, so at the amount of about $7,800 per pupil. So if we have,
Is that money that's coming from the public schools?
it is not. No, it's entirely different. And public schools are funded, at least in part, in the same way. They are reimbursed, or they're paid by the state on a per pupil basis.
Thank you.
Hi, Jack Cameron, 10587 Swindon Court. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Thank you for having this session. Dr. Hardings, you did a nice job with your presentation. I don't necessarily have a question, but just a process kind of observation. I've been doing local government management for 24 years, did it 10 years for Evendale, so I'm pretty familiar with here in the process. The one thing I would be somewhat concerned about, and this isn't a measurement of what you have proposed or what you're doing. I thought it looked great. I commend you on your efforts and hope you're successful with it. This particular piece of property, I'll say it was punted. There was no decision made on what was wanted on this property. So I'm a big process guy, and so by process, you still need to go back and define what it is you would like to see on the property. Unfortunately, when you don't and you have somebody in front of you, you're making a decision about individuals and it becomes a personal thing, which it shouldn't be. I'm not offering my thoughts on your potential use. That I had my chance years ago, but I would say as a process, you need to go back and decide as a comprehensive plan, what is the use you want on this particular property? And so right now it's undefined. I think it's general commercial, so it would have to be rezoned, which would then, I call that spot zoning. And
It's public facilities right now.
It's public facility, okay. So process-wise, I think you go back as a group, it goes through iterations, there's reasons you look at different uses, and so right now it's undefined as far as what the village wants. So that would be my bigger pushback to you. As far as your proposal, you did a nice job presenting it, and I don't have any particular questions for you, but thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm really very excited about this project and hope that it just sounds fabulous. I'm very excited. Hope my grandchildren can be there. So I wanted to make a kind of a clarification, because being in the school systems for a very long time, with my experience has been more with vouchers, and this seems like a very different thing. Doesn't have the same restrictions as vouchers, so I just wanted to clarify that. The children who could apply are able to be from any, like I live in Forest Hills, and so we don't have a failing school district, so children can come from anywhere. It's not dependent on the rating of their school, their local school district. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep. Anywhere in Ohio, and they can come from Indiana and Kentucky as well, but then they pay tuition.
Concerning the source of funding, the $7,800, that's operating cost. What about the initial construction cost? What's funding that?
That will be funded through a bond that we will have someone underwrite for us, and for probably the cost of around $15 to $20 million to develop the site and build the school. and we'll have to we'll pay that down over, the given period of time, 30 years, however long. Yep. Yeah, the state does not provide any money, the state or federal government. We're applying for federal grants that would bring us $700,000 in startup costs, mostly for supplies and equipment that we would need to furnish the school. But neither those funds nor any other funds from the state can be used for building or improving a facility. So that has to all be financed.
I have a few questions.
We're happy to accept donations too.
In follow-up to Mr. Robertson's question regarding, and you mentioned the $7,800 that is received directly from the state, and you indicated that it is a per pupil allocation. If I'm following you right, though, that if a Princeton student decides now to go to CCA, that $7,800 or whatever that funding is will not go to Princeton, but it would now go to you. Is that correct?
That's correct. The
All right,
money follows the students.
So although Princeton is not paying for that student, it is a reduction in resources that would be going to Princeton schools due to that student moving to CCA.
That's correct. Just like if I fill up the tank of gas in my car at Speedway, that means Sunoco's not getting that money. That means Marathon's not getting that money. Yep, and that's true for all the schools, whether it's Sycamore or St. X or Ursuline, correct?
Is there an admission test?
No, admission tests and any kind of aptitude testing to, that's one of the, anyway, it's illegal. Yeah, it's not allowed under Ohio law.
This seems like a very rigorous curriculum, which I commend you. I agree with Mr. Cameron. It sounds like a great school, and kudos to everybody involved. But it seems like a very arduous curriculum. And if you have anybody applying and you're accepting anybody that does apply, how do you navigate through the process of those students who can't meet the standards?
Eric, would you want to address that? Mm-hmm.
So I'm representing Hillsdale College. Thanks for letting me be here. So we have 24 schools in 11 different states, and we have schools in all kinds of different areas. I mean, to give you kind of a good picture of two very different schools, we've got Atlanta Classical Academy in Buckhead, Atlanta, which is sort of the fancy suburb right by the governor's mansion, and they mostly compete for enrollment with private schools in the area. We've got a school in Gallup, New Mexico that's 60% Navajo, and represents a tremendous amount of rural poverty, and we're meeting the needs of those kids too. I will definitely tell you it's a rigorous program, and the kind of performance, the kind of conversations you hear from students 5 years into the school is much different than you hear on the first day. But we think that it can be made accessible to all students. When we talk about rigor, we're not trying to overload students with work and homework. We're trying to make it possible for students to read Virgil, for students to read Homer. And so providing them with the skills to do that, helping them to do that, and then differentiating learning so that the students of all the needs of all students are being met. And the special needs populations in our school is pretty reflective of the national average. The national average is about 11% of students with special needs. We have about that amount in our schools, with some schools serving a larger number because word gets out that they've got a great special education department, and those families tend to talk to each other, and so those families will flock to those kinds of schools.
So those students are not dismissed, but they're accommodated in other ways.
That's
through
right.
Special programs and everything.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
What is your student-to-teacher ratios?
It's about 14-to-1 if you look across our entire network.
What's your dropout rate?
I don't have the dropout rate. I know that our four-year high school graduation rate is about 99%, but I don't know what the dropout rate is.
Got a few more questions.
Sure. Yeah.
What's your timeline? When do you need a decision by? Because I absolutely agree with Mr. Cameron. I was part of the planning commission, planning process 15, 20 years ago, and we worked on that property, identified. I was part of the process when we purchased it from Rinks. Schools never came up in the discussion, and so this is really accelerating a process that at least I, for one, although I like the concept of the school, I'm not comfortable with the process that would be required to facilitate, accommodating what you're looking at.
I would think that we would need to close, and Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, jump in here, but I think we would need to close on a property this summer because we would need to break ground by the fall to be able to have the construction completed by next summer and the school ready to go by the fall. So this summer.
So you're really asking for fast tracking this whole process, if we even have a process.
That's what
One
we're
other,
discussing.
and this has come up in just speculation, I just wanted to hear it from you, regarding the potential that there would be a demand on village resources, primarily facilities, because of the proximity to the recreation center and the campus. I see, I saw, okay, you have the gym and you have it looks like a soccer field that certainly addressed some of that misunderstanding perhaps, but do you anticipate requesting any assistance of resources from the village at all? Are you going to be completely independent, or part of your interest in this is because you are next to the rec center and you have access to tennis courts, you have access to a lot of our other resources?
I don't think our interest in this property is contingent upon any of that type of cooperation. If that was something that Evendale was interested in, I think we would be as well. But I don't think our interest is dependent on that. Correct?
May not be dependent on it, but is it still there? And is it your desire that there be some coordinated?
Well, I mean, I can say generally it's our interest to utilize fields wherever we might find them.
Okay.
So, I mean, it would be ridiculous just to say no.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
I appreciate it.
But we're not looking to rely on that. We're looking to be self-sufficient.
Other questions? Might suggest if you have questions at a social distance, you might want to line up at the microphone, just so we can go from one to the next.
So you said there was like 600 students to start with, K through 6?
Correct.
So that's 7 grades, and yet there's a 14-to-1 ratio. How many kids per classroom? Because that doesn't add up math-wise. Unless there's like 4 or 5 classes per grade?
Yeah, so I think you'd find that there's between 20 and 25 students per classroom, depending upon the grade. But when you count the ratio, you also count some of your specialist teachers. So you're going to have an art teacher, music teacher, a foreign language teacher, a PE teacher, and so those count against that overall ratio. So that's how you get to 14-to-1.
Okay, so will there be a fluctuation based on attendance? If there's more third grades, you'll have more third grade classrooms
Yeah,
to start with?
Jed can speak to that, but generally speaking, we would recommend that third grade classrooms not exceed about 25 students, certainly not more than 27 students.
Okay, so there will be maxed out. How would those additional grades be added every year? Is the building already intact and just closed off classrooms, classrooms?
Correct. That's sort of the leading model, is that the entire building would be built in the first year up front. Okay. That would accommodate K through 12. Mm-hmm.
And
but the part of it just wouldn't be used initially.
Gotcha. You guys kind of touched on it. So IEPs are in play, okay? And athletics, is there, you guys joining a conference, or how does that work? Independent completely, or?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Seriously, that's not something we've looked into yet, but, you know, I know that I'm sure that there are venues for that, so that we would have schools to compete against.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, if I could address that a little bit, just, I think as Jed had mentioned, we've built a number of these schools in Florida and in other states. And to answer your question on the conference, I know that several of the schools that we've built after the school is enrolled, they are in Florida, it goes all the way up to a 9A division, and they'll be placed within the division appropriate with the size of the school. One of the best softball teams in the state comes from one of the charter schools. One of the best lacrosse teams does. There's some great basketball teams. So, but I think it's a matter of how the school ends up determining what sports are offered in the operations, but they would be part of the overall conference.
Back to Mr. Albrecht, follow up Mr. Albrecht's question. Do you have a master schedule that shows, that works backward from the 2022, 2023 start of school to when the construction's got to be completed, when it's got to begin, that high-level milestones?
Sure, and that's a great question. We do have we have a number of sort of projected time frames.
Could you repeat the question? Not everybody in the back to hear.
Yeah, the question, sorry, the question was, do we have a projected milestone date schedule working backwards from the opening of school next year to today to understand what that approval schedule timeline is? And the quick answer for that is that we have some preliminary projections. Obviously, it's dependent on the feedback from the village and the timing on being able to close on the property. What I can tell you is that, again, we understand we've built in this area that when you get into the winter months, it slows your construction down a bit. Where in Florida, you can do a lot quicker, but we've actually completed 5 to 7 acre sites, 70,000 square foot schools in 4.5 months. It's what we specialize in, so we obviously don't want to do that, but we've taken a reasonable time frame and worked backwards from a 8-month construction schedule. Then we factor in how long it takes to get through the designing process, the permitting process. So we do have those, nothing that's finalized yet. I think every meeting we have once a week, we're talking about where are we at in that schedule, and at a certain point, we have to be very realistic with ourselves and say, if we're not approved to moving forward by this date, then we need to look at the following year. But right now, we're projecting for this year, this coming year.
Out of curiosity, there's been multiple questions about the use of the property just north of here, and the concern of the speedy process to get it approved. This is a question more for the city potentially. What plans do you have for the property if this were not to go through, because it's sat vacant for 10 to 15 years already?
Actually, the property has sat there for 30 years and has not been used. We have, please? My apologies. Okay. The community, the village has no intent of usage of the property. We don't have any designation of what should go there or what shouldn't go there. We've looked at office buildings. We've had a retirement home there. We've had single-family homes to be put there. But we don't have any concept of what we like there is a large office building. It's employ 300 or 400 people at $85,000 a piece on our income tax. But it's just not happening. It's just not happening, folks. So that's all I can say.
I would like to just add on to that a little bit. And the reason it's sat for 30 years is because we have been very selective. We have been, there have been several, people express interest in developing that site. but because of the proximity to the village and that inherent value to the village, we have been very selective in our analysis, and that's why, a big part of why. Otherwise, we probably have a retirement home there or single homes or any number of other developments, but we have been very selective in making sure that it is the right fit for, you know, literally our neighbor to the north.
I have a kind of a logistical question about traffic on Reading Road. First of all, I assume that the students provide their own transportation, right? And if a student lives within the Princeton district, does that mean Princeton has to provide busing to the school? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, the school district in which the student resides is responsible to, or they have an obligation to provide transportation to the student to our school, provided that I think that it's within a 30-minute driving distance.
So those 10 school districts you said
so that works the same as for any other public schools, and I think even, Cheryl, am I correct, that private schools as well? If you live in Princeton School District and you go to Ursuline, you know, Princeton's going to provide transportation for those students.
But the other school districts that they live in will also be doing that, or just Princeton?
No. All the school districts, wherever the student resides.
So there may be a lot of buses coming up and down Reading Road, as well as parents bringing them and dropping them off. Okay. And then if you have ultimately K through 12 all under one roof, do you stagger school timing, and, you know, do the younger kids have different hours than the high school? And so just kind of curious how that works when you have all those age groups.
So a great question again, and that's something that we've seen a lot. And what typically happens is that the start times are staggered between the grade school, middle school, and high school, and same with the release time. And usually I believe it's the youngest student at their release time, if they have a sibling that's in a higher grade, is released with them at that time. So it is staggered to work through that. And, you know, part of our process is working with traffic experts and the local village to find and accommodate to make that the least impact that we can to the community.
Because I think Reading Road's access and congestion may be a factor we ought to think about too during school hours.
Yes.
And one more question. Do you foresee any use for the building after school hours, in the evenings, and or will it just be a closed facility? So we'd only have to worry about during school hours.
Well, and I think that would be the decision of the board and, you know, the operation of the school. I know that a lot of the schools that we've done have after-hour care facilities for so that parents can come pick their children up when they're done with work, and a little bit earlier drop-off for some of those students. And obviously if there's a sports program, there might be some after-hours type activity for the sports program. And one other thing I just want to mention too, because I know that traffic can be a big concern. One of the things that we've excelled at in our designs is providing a access on site that allows stacking of cars for pickup and drop off, so they're not spilling into the driveway, even to the point that we've been asked in to meet with the traditional public schools in Florida to go through our process, because they're always clogging intersections and roads. So we're very cognizant of that with our designs.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Dr. Hardings, just to follow up on that last question, don't I recall that when you made your initial presentation to us, you said there was a possibility for adult continuing education as well in the evenings or at hours other than school, or did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, I don't think I presented anything or suggested anything about that.
Okay.
But I think that we would be open to the use, to the public use of the school.
I see.
I mean, we're doing this in the public interest.
Yeah.
We wanted that's what the virtues are all about that we're teaching in the schools. We want to be good partners to each other. want to build our communities and raise our kids that way. So it's completely in line with the mission that if we're fortunate enough to someday have a nice auditorium, performance hall, we want that to be used as much as possible.
Thank you.
A new school would be great, but we have St. Rita's School, which is probably not being utilized as it is. Have you guys looked or had any discussions with the diocese about using that existing property, I mean, which is classical in style, and might serve the purposes?
Yes, we have. We've met with St. Rita's. We've toured the building. We've toured the grounds. They're planning to relocate or rethink their use of their space because they're not big enough to continue to use that big building. Unfortunately, the way it's constructed it was a boarding school, and most of what you see there are dormitories. So they don't have any large classroom space. They're all very small spaces that would not be feasible to hold a class of 20 kids. Yep. And they're also rather undecided on their future.
I just want to add a little bit more information on the busing and that issue. I was involved with, and again, I'm Brian Kennedy, I am a member of the board. I was involved with transportation at Madeira Public School, and one of the things that we did is, no school wants to run a big bus with one kid to this school or any other school. So what the schools have been doing forever is they will work together, we worked with Indian Hill and we worked with Marymount. And the school buses would meet up in different locations throughout these different towns and trade kids. Madeira kids, we would drop off some who were going to go to Ursuline, and then we would take theirs who were going to go to Cincinnati Country Day. And so these accommodations have been going on for a long time, and every school district wants to use their buses as efficiently as they can. And everybody understands putting one kid on a 40-foot bus doesn't work. So these things are one of the things that have been contemplated. It's currently going on today, right now, and should be a relatively easy move for that to be included in our school as well.
Just one thing, if I could. Is this on? Just one thing for clarification. This is not a submittal for a site plan or a use. If this were to go forward, they would have to come back through Planning Commission, which deals with all the issues like traffic, access, lighting, effect on Reading Road. So all of those issues would be dealt with at that time in a way that is suitable to the village and their process. So this is simply an exploration of the village's appetite for this kind of concept. It's not a guarantee. We have not asked them to provide details about how you would solve each of these problems at this point, but that is absolutely a part of this process. It just hasn't happened yet.
Others? Going once? Twice? Well, thank you, Dr. Hardings, and thank you to all of you for coming and making this presentation. And thanks to all of you for your interest and for coming out and being attentive and asking questions.
And we'd be happy to follow up if there's questions that came in online and, continue for as long as is needed if questions come in from the survey, et cetera.
And that's certainly true for the village, too. Again, part of the purpose of this process, as Chris Patterson just summarized, is to discern the preferences of the people in the village for what we do with that property. So please feed back to your elected representatives, use the questionnaire, call them, contact them otherwise, and we'll do our best to get the answers you need.
And feel free to email me. You can email with comments or suggestions or anything about it. I've had 3 emails today. Feel free to email me.
Okay, if if that's all, then we are done, and thank you again for your attendance.